I think the last talk is our conference classic, and happy I don't have to do it by myself. I have Lars here with us, who's our CTO, and I mean, he's the guy who knows actually all that stuff. And so we will share this talk and give you an insight about what we plan for Checkmk 2.4 and beyond. So Matthias, the founder of Checkmk, he taught me that we need to build Checkmk together. We need to build it together with the users. And his experience was that every feature he came up by himself was actually a really bad feature. So that's why at some point he just said, okay, he only builds the stuff which is coming from the user, which is coming as a request. And I think the success of Checkmk is hugely based on this collaboration with users to bring out basically your domain know-how together with our problem-solving knowledge. And I think I really share this belief because, I mean, Checkmk is not my product, it's not Lars's product, it's not Jan's product, it's, I think, our product. And therefore, we always ask you at the conference and also via other things, what do you like to have? And whenever we design our roadmap and think about what we want to do, we look at these things. We cannot make everything happen, of course. But here's some examples of things which we have done from the Conference 8 votings already in Checkmk 2.3. A lot more are coming in 2.4, and the same for the Conference 9 votings. And we also have this future focus. This is an input which comes into our long-term strategy, because we also think always about what do we want to do in the next couple of years, and not just for the next release. Another source of inspiration is the Ideas Portal. And for Checkmk 2.3, we implemented, I think, 25 ideas. Since we started the portal, that was in May 22, we implemented already 67 ideas. And for us, the Ideas Portal is a treasure trove of ideas. Now, whenever we decide to improve Checkmk here or there, and we actually look through the entire Ideas Portal to see, are there any things which we should consider? For example, if we want to improve notifications, one of the things we do is, for example, we look through the Ideas Portal, what are problems users are facing, what are ideas users have around this area? And then we can decide and make a much informative decision on what we want to do. And this mentality is also ultimately reflected in our guiding principles. And this is what we have set ourselves as the ambition, how we want to build Checkmk. And we don't want to build features without user involvement. Every feature really needs to be something which is approved by users, which is tested by users, and which doesn't make it into the product without anyone having it seen before. Yeah? The other thing is, when we do this high-level strategy, we want to consider the user input and we consider the priorities in it. And something which has been lacking over the last years, what we heard from you is like the transparency on the roadmap and on the progress. And we focused a lot in the last couple of months to make more transparency there. I'm posting in the forum every once in a while, here's an update. I updated it on the website. And also, this presentation is a very long presentation. I think it's 100 slides, because we want to go much more into detail to share with you our ideas about the future and get your input early, like we did with the notifications, we did with the multi-step workflows, that we show you concepts here at the conference and that you can give us feedback afterwards, that we can include this before we actually build it. And lastly, reacting quickly to development requests is something which is also dear to me. This was not something which we always were able to do, and we have done a lot of changes now in the background, and we are still doing a lot of changes in the background to make this happen in the future much better. So for 2.4, we basically will have two labels which you will see in the slides. One is things which we have planned for 2.4, and we want to really delineate our ambition for the roadmap. So these things are stuff which will likely come in 2.4. We might change the scope, of course, yeah. Then the other things where we say, we accept them for a future release. we give a commitment that we want to do it. We don't want to give yet a commitment on the timeline. But we will not put things in there which are unrealistic. If we deem them realistic for the next 1 or 2 years, then they're in here. Of course, everything is subject to change. Unplanned things can always happen. So let's now jump into the roadmap. And over the last 5 years, and you've heard Jan already speak about that, we really try to fulfill this mission of building a modern monitoring for the hybrid world, powered by a great user experience and extensible interfaces on our scalable and secure monitoring platform. And we have already started our journey into the future. Yeah? We have shared with you what we are already doing, for example, for synthetic monitoring, our SaaS offering as well. And now I will start first about what is next for our SaaS offering. And I saw a lot of the questions already in the Q&As before. And I mean, these are the things which we'll actually be working on. So what's next for Checkmk Cloud? And with Checkmk Cloud, the goal is that you can monitor everything as you can with Checkmk Enterprise as of today. We focused initially with Checkmk Cloud with the SaaS version on web services, on cloud infrastructure, and anything where you can run a Checkmk agent on. And with that, we already cover quite a lot of use cases. However, the really big piece Checkmk is really known for is network devices via SNMP, for example, or internal services like vSphere. And for that, our idea is to build something of like an automated remote probe. It's not a remote site, as you know it, it will be something different. Yeah? And you can use then this automated remote probe to monitor network devices via SNMP. You can also use it for monitoring internal services like a vSphere, which are not exposed to the internet. We'll also extend our Kubernetes monitoring that it's based on a push mode. Right now it's a pull mode, but for a SaaS-based monitoring, we also need such a push mode for that. And lastly, things like the event console will be initially disabled in Checkmk Cloud for the SaaS deployment mode, but eventually we'll also make that happen. And all that needs to run on this platform, as we call it. And for that, the first thing we will add is single sign-on, so that you can use your identity providers, which are popular in your environment or which you already have there. And then we will start supporting large infrastructures in the beginning. We plan to limit it to 50,000 services per site. This is something where we felt this is something we can do on a safe manner. But of course, we at some point have to also support much higher infrastructures, much larger infrastructures for monitoring. And the current mechanism in Checkmk is to use distributed sites for that. And for that use case, we consider to improve this concept further so that it works also for our SaaS deployment. And one of the most powerful concepts in Checkmk are the extensions. And to make these extensions work for Checkmk SaaS, we will build a certified extension store eventually so that you can install these plugins directly into Checkmk. For the topic of application monitoring, we already talked about synthetic monitoring, and I want to go a little bit into details what we plan to do with it, because this initial release, which we did in late of April, is just the beginning of a journey. And the first thing which is required to do synthetic monitoring is to write tests, to develop tests. And we want to make that easier by eventually allowing you to create and edit simple tests directly in Checkmk. And Visual Studio Code is actually an excellent tool for writing robot framework extensions because it has a lot of plugins which work really well. And we also want to have our own plugin, our own extension there, that you can even do that more seamless and benefit of the Checkmk features to do these things. And while we believe these features are a nice addition to synthetic monitoring and will improve your life, they are not essential to getting things done. Much more important is the topic of running tests. And in 2.3 you can run tests on Windows, but Checkmk currently requires that you have an unlocked user session and to be able to execute these tests. And to circumvent this, we plan to implement headless desktop tests And our initial proof of concepts were very promising so far by using local RDP sessions. And running tests on Windows will cover most use cases, but not all. Yeah. So Linux is next on the map that we build support for it. Yeah. Our focus for 2.4 will actually be to build a robot manager. Robots are the programs which run the tests. And just imagine you can take a robot, you upload it to Checkmk, then the agent bakery distributes the right robots to the nodes, and that way the entire workflow is now automated for running tests. And now let's take this concept even one step further. We have the robot manager. Let's consider you can just put them into the Checkmk cloud. And then you can test from the outside as well, all the things which you want to do, without the need for own infrastructure. And lastly, we need to obviously monitor the tests. And to extend the visualization capabilities for that is one of our goals. We want to enable things like that, pre-built graphs or automated graphs for detailed monitoring of tests of the keywords on the level below, much nicer visualizations, and maybe also stuff like maps, and so on. Now, with the user experience of applications covered, we are all good, are we? I mean, because Checkmk can already do some kind of application monitoring. But this is apparently not good enough for us. But what are we missing? Lars, can you maybe enlighten us?
Let's hope so. Right, application monitoring. So Checkmk can do something here. When we talk about application monitoring, you can roughly divide that into two categories, like the standard applications, off-the-shelf applications, SAP, Jenkins, you name it, whatever you have in your infrastructure, those are software applications which you want to monitor, whether it works or not. And Checkmk has invested a lot of time there to provide you with the most important plugins so that you can monitor what is relevant to you. And the second category is custom applications, like your web shop, what you have running in your organization, what is specific to your organization. And there, we are not as easily configurable as it might be possible to do so. So what we provide now is what we thought is maybe the best we can provide you to give you the capability to build something yourself, like build generic mechanisms, which we have in place since already a long time. You can build fully fledged Checkmk checks with agent plugins and all the bells and whistles, and you can have easy and quick integration into the agent with local checks. But that requires time. You need to invest a bit of your time to build such integrations, and then you also need to look at the APIs, how does it work, and you need to know a bit of scripting at least to make it work. And yeah, that's what we thought. That's the point where we can go to. We cannot go much further because in application monitoring, the issue is that there's no kind of standard API, like a protocol, whatever, where generic monitoring solutions like we are can simply base on and say, okay, that's the approach. We now do custom application monitoring like this and can cover everything. So luckily, the IT world is evolving and things are happening around. So yeah, we are thinking about covering something which has gained a lot of popularity over the past years. With the rise of Prometheus, they introduced something like the so-called metric endpoints. And it's something not really like the Checkmk agent data, but similar on the concept level. You have kind of a definition how the data is structured, and then you have basically an HTTP endpoint which you can approach and pull your data out and then do whatever you want with that, power the monitoring system, whatever. And that gained a lot of popularity also in newer applications, so that we at customers see more and more environments having that and asking us, well, can you connect with that? Can you build checks, alarms, whatever on top of that? And yeah, the next step of evolution is with OpenTelemetry, the OpenTelemetry project. They are taking that further. They are defining more powerful protocols. They are defining standards which go beyond metrics. They also care for logs and traces. And with that happening over the years, we now see this as something which is worth interfacing with, which can be a great benefit for you and your custom applications. So it's time for us to jump in there and build on top of that, basically. And also here, kind of a disclaimer, this is kind of a concept, and the idea, the actual way we would build that might look different. I'm also looking forward to discussions. Maybe if you are already into that topic, you have such applications, maybe you've built something your own, please let me, let Martin know, so that we can understand your use cases better, and then in the end build the right thing for Checkmk 2.4. So far, what we think of is that we want to interface with the metrics endpoints, so we want to be able to pull the data in, and we want to be able to receive the OpenTelemetry data, only focusing on metrics currently, and we want to somehow transport that, maybe with the agent, to the Checkmk server. And in the end, on the Checkmk server side, what we want to provide you in the first step is generic plugins, which you don't need to program or something. You can just configure that by the user interface and say, this value is interesting, I want to have a metric for that, I want to give it that title, give me an alarm for that. You know the concept. And yeah, that's basically the first step we would want to take. And on top of that, we can imagine additional steps for the future, which would be to provide more powerful generic plugins, like not only showing a metric, but also combining the metrics with a formula you may provide, like adding some metrics, building an average, whatever. And also for more standard cases, like pretty normal HTTP applications, it could be useful to provide a generic HTTP 500 error plugin, which helps you to configure this case easier. And the next step is quite a fundamental change to the system, which also needs to be changed, needs to be thought through very carefully. The idea here is that in application monitoring, you very often have, especially when it's your application and the application developers working with that, you don't know in advance which values you will need in the end. When you're in debugging, retrospective analysis situations, you want to have the data captured over time already, so that when you have a problem, you can look at the system and, I don't know, have an idea where the issue is, then you look at the metrics, then you combine that, and then you have another idea, and then you look here and there. And for that, you need basically a metric storage system which is able to record all the data for the time horizon which is important to you, and then be able to later on work with the data. And this is what we want to work on in Checkmk and provide you with the capabilities to do so, to make also the metrics independently of the services, so that you can just dump the data into Checkmk and then retrospectively work with a powerful UI with more interactive analysis mechanics on those data to basically explore that. With this kind of feature set, we think we can provide you with a powerful set of monitoring capabilities to monitor your entire IT stack. So now we have, so far in this talk, talked about the future of cloud, synthetic monitoring, application monitoring. And now, of course, you may wonder, what will happen to the heart of Checkmk, like all the things you use on a daily basis? And don't worry, there's a lot to come. You know this picture already. That has been our kind of structure for 2.3, and that will not change for 2.4. So the system is the same, and also the idea to move that forward is the same. We will start going through these areas, start with the monitoring platform we built upon, and now we come to kind of a few fancy things and buzzwords, and of course, AI. Yeah. Now, Checkmk, automatically AI, you don't need to configure anything anymore. Not really. But a few interesting things here, yeah? So I guess like every software vendor out there, we are also thinking, how can we utilize this, yeah? How can we improve Checkmk with it? How can we make your life easier, deliver new things which were not possible before? So we are thinking about a few things, and some things may already be familiar to you, like the predictive monitoring. We think about natural language interaction, assisted development, and also anomaly detection and correlation. And in this talk, we want to talk about the three most specific, the first ones, and just look into what is there for us. The predictive monitoring is already in Checkmk for many years now. And it's a pretty neat feature. You can basically alter your thresholds, which are normally fixed ones, based on past observations. So when you have a pretty regular workload on a system, this might help you to have the kind of peak patterns that you have during some time of the day to automatically make your monitoring system adapt to that. And yeah, do some kind of machine learning here to automatically adapt to what is the reality there. Yeah, you look at the slide and think, well, that's not a typical Checkmk graph. That does not look really nice. And that's true to some degree. And besides improving the visualization here, we will also work on the usability, how to configure that, how to work with that in the end, how it is integrated in the UI. Yeah, and this whole feature is currently very limited to a few checks in Checkmk, to a few metrics. And many users ask about, can you make it available here and there? And yes, you can, and we want to provide that in a few other areas where it is useful. It is not useful for every metric, but in a few more than it currently is. So you can make more use of it and use it in more places. The next thing, we all know that we work with a complex system like Checkmk. And there are questions, there are problems, error messages, whatever. And what do you do with that? Paste that into the search engine of your choice. And likely, this will guide you to the forum. And likely, this will guide you to something that is, of course, answered by Andreas, pointing you to the right place in the user manual, right? That is what's happening very often. So now, imagine you could have your personal Andreas. And this is how it could look like. You open up a website provided by us, of course, powered with AI. And whatever question you have about Checkmk, whatever error you experience, paste your thing in, ask that something like, for example, this question. I heard about piggyback, yeah? What the hell is this? In a normal form, like we know it from other assistants, this is answered by you in hopefully an understandable way. And what is important here, that we want to provide you with references. Because often you want to have additional information, details you want to read up. Maybe you also want to prove what is written here because you don't really trust that AI thingy. So what we want to integrate here is something that is directly in the tool and then points you to the source of the information. And then it is highlighted, you can read up context information way easier, so you can then also look up the details and understand more than has been answered here. Of course, you can also ask follow-up questions, as you probably know from other systems. And we can imagine taking that even further, helping you in Check development, or doing the job for you, basically. And what we have here is based on our rich set of open source checks, and an eye can be trained on that. And actually, with the right prompts and the right specification, you can build basic working check plugins. You can just do that here and enter the information, and it pulls you out the code. You can paste that into your site, and it works. So, leaving that area, coming to real Checkmk problems. Monitoring dynamic systems at scale. That's a challenge of Checkmk. Yeah, we have more and more infrastructure which changes automatically, which changes manually over time. We have our AWS infrastructures where people in our organization are changing things. And since there are APIs where you can get the data from, it is expected from you that the monitoring system automatically adapts to that and does the right thing with the current state of whatever system you monitor. Whether it's a Kubernetes cluster, whether it's your AWS infrastructure, or a vSphere environment. And at Checkmk, this is currently powered by Piggyback and the dynamic host management. Two technologies I will briefly explain, at least try to, and then tell you what we want to improve there. First, Piggyback. Let's take the example. We have a location in Munich, vSphere node, 2 VMs running on that, a site next to it, monitoring the VMs via the Linux agent. And then there's the vCenter. We get the basic services from the Checkmk agent about what the operating system is providing. And then there's the vCenter knowing also a few things about that VM, backup states and a few other things. And this is what we are using Piggyback for. We are querying the vCenter, getting information about the 2 VMs, and then attaching the information to the 2 VMs so that we can then there see the services. So far, so good. A basic mechanic which has been in Checkmk for very long and is also a really successful concept driving many features. Now, the world is more complicated than that. We often have distributed monitoring. Now there's a location in Bielefeld. We have the same setup, vSphere node, 2 VMs, Checkmk site next to it. And we have basically the same needs. We want the data from the agent and also from the vCenter. And that has been a weakness in Checkmk since also a long time and is a long demanded feature. We know that from the feature portal, I guess, or ideas portal, sorry. Good, with Checkmk 2.4, we want to finally make it happen to deliver the data to the sites where they are needed. So you can then get finally the full visibility into your VMs, even on the remote sites. Then the second piece, dynamic host management, which automatically acts on that piggyback data and adapts your configuration based on the information which is in there. Like there are 2 VMs, okay, I don't know that in the monitoring, I need to create the hosts. And here we have a system that basically works for for many environments, like normal sized environments, normal dynamic behavior. But for really large environments, typically Kubernetes environments, we run into some issues, like scalability issues, which then also result into some kind of instabilities. And this is something we definitely want to work on because we want to cover these cases, which are the reality for users out there. So we need some change here. And what we are facing here currently is that the dynamic hosts configuration is configured with so-called connections. Like you configure one connection maybe for one cluster and one for the other, and then these connections work independently, gather the information, and then create the hosts, discover services, activate changes. And these processes run independently from each other and can also interfere with each other because underlying systems have kind of logs. Not all actions can run concurrently. Yeah, and all these connections can also, when you start the site, run at the same time, which also creates some kind of load peaks, which you don't want to have. So what we want to change here is to rework the architecture a bit, to still do the parallel data collection, because that's fine to do. And then for the later steps, queue the work up and then work on the individual steps independently. Like first we create a bunch of hosts we collect a bunch of hosts to be created. And then we create them all at once. Then we do the discovery independently of where the data was coming from which connection. Do the discovery for all the needed hosts, then do the activation. So these steps are still kind of sequentially, but in that form, when they are independent from the connection, they can be much better managed. Like we can more easily bulk them, and we can also prevent conflicts. I mean, we don't have conflicts anymore between the connections. So that can be managed way better. So it's an approach to control the situation way better. Another feature in this area we need to talk about is the automation user. Also with Checkmk for a very, very long time and needed by Checkmk features like the dynamic host configuration and a few other features. But still, despite it's needed for us, you have the option as users to modify the user, reduce the capabilities in terms of permissions. Also, you can delete the user, which breaks features in Checkmk. Well, why, you may ask? Yeah? It's unnecessary. So what we want to do here is to get rid of this problem. To explain to you how that happened, maybe. When building Checkmk, building up different components, at some point we had the need for intercomponent authentication, intercomponent communication. So we came up with that automation user, which is fine. It's the way how you interact as script with Checkmk and how you authenticate. So we used that and based our implementation on that. On the same page, we said, well, if you want to use that user, it's there, you may use it. Yeah? It's totally fine, why not? And that the uncertainty came like a user does not know for what is it used exactly, what permissions does it need exactly. Am I the only consumer of that user, or is it Checkmk? I don't know. So that's an ambiguity we need to overcome, and what we're gonna do with 2.4 is to introduce a new site internal authentication, which will then we use. And in this way, we have full control about what is happening there. It's completely under the hood. So the normal automation user we currently create with the sample configuration will not be needed anymore. Completely different area. The Checkmk UI is a backend rendered UI. It has served us well over many years now. Nevertheless, we will integrate a front-end rendered component. So we are moving somehow towards the more front-end rendered approach, which gives us several capabilities. We are doing that with the Vue.js framework, which is modern, easy to integrate, and also performant framework. With that, we can build UI features faster. We can provide you with more powerful front-end features, so in the end, more interactive working on single pages. And we also can build, in the end, a faster UI. And we have been working for this for quite some time already, thinking about all the possibilities and all of the stuff. So for a long time working into that, you could not see anything at all about this. But with 2.4, the first things will happen, which are then visible to you. So the first and most specific thing is we have the custom graph editor, which is kind of a user dialog, which is very interactive. Like you do some changes, you see the graph, then you want to do some additional changes. And that's still something which is backend rendered and feels kind of clunky when you work with it, especially with a bigger graph. So with the front-end rendered approach, this will be much smoother, which we plan here to do. And then the more general changes, the tables you know in the setup, they will be in the future rendered with that framework so that you can work more interactively with these tables. You can sort them quicker. You can also kind of quick search them quicker. It is directly filtered in the user interface, so no reload at that moment anymore. And the forms we know in the setup will also be more interactive in the form of you provide some input, some validation happens, and you get immediate feedback. Don't have to submit the whole form anymore. And again, something completely different, FIPS compliance. With the ever-growing user base, we also get more requests in that direction, like Checkmk running on a FIPS compliant system, mostly a Red Hat system, which has the FIPS mode enabled on the kernel level, applying some restrictions to the system, like hashing algorithms being denied to use. So when you try to use them, there's something that prevents that. And actually, we have been working on getting rid of the insecure or not wanted hashing algorithms for some reason. We have been working on removing them, especially from the areas which are cryptographically relevant. In other areas, it is not too relevant which hashing algorithm you use, as long as it gives you what you wanted in the first place. But on a FIPS compliant system, it does not work like that. So we also have to get rid of these. And this is what will happen with the 2.4. There are not too many places left. Still some third-party library we need to somehow solve the issue with. But I'm confident that we will be able to make that. Now, enough about this area of Checkmk. Let's come to the monitoring, what we can monitor in your infrastructure. On the one hand, it is about our capabilities to monitor all your systems, to cover all your needs there. On the other hand, it is about being able to run on all your systems, like the agent, to be able to execute it there. And there are a few systems out there which are more special than others, like they have stricter security requirements. And about this case, I want to talk briefly. Here you see a typical Checkmk agent setup. That's the classic one, like the agent is executed with root privileges. Why is that? Because we want all information and transport them to Checkmk on the server side to be able to monitor as much as possible. And also in the more recent agent setup involving the agent controller, we have basically the same up. The data gathering is executed with root privileges. And we still think this is a sensible trade-off between what we can collect and what we need to accept for that. Nevertheless, there are these very strict requirements which we want to cover better. And to do so, we want to provide a new deployment mode with the agent, which is, let's call it the non-root agent. The basic idea is what the name says. We call the agent without root privileges in the first place. Thinking more about that, well, there's also agent updating, and would also be nice to be able to do that without root privileges. So how would that work? So how would we actually implement that? First of all, the agent needs to be invoked without root privileges. Quite easy. Still, you want to have the option to collect the data which require root privileges. And for this, the agent needs to be adapted further so that we can, with the right sudo rules applied on the system, you can collect the information via sudo from the kernel or from the file system somewhere. Then the agent updater needs to be adapted to not be directly tied, strictly tied with the package manager of your system. The idea is here to decouple both, introduce a tarball-based deployment form so that we can, as a lower privileged user, deploy the agent into that directory and then also update that with the help of the agent updater. So all in all, once deployed with lower privileges in the first place, you first get a little less information, and with additional configuration of sudo, you get the exact same output of the agent as before. In the area of the agent, we can improve further things. Now, in terms of usability, especially the users who use the agent controller and the agent updater in combination on a system, they may find this familiar. You have basically two registrations, the registration of the agent controller and the one of the agent updater. And you need to do both, and you must not confuse them. And, well, this is confusing. We want to work on that side to make this scenario, this use case easier, and in the end, combine the registrations we have, maybe in this way, maybe in a slightly different way, but in the end, the effect should be that in the scenario where you have both, you only need one registration and you're done, and you can basically use both tools as you want. One step further, we still had two tools, right? One step further would be somehow combine that, because having two tools for that is just historical. Yeah, that's just the reason that the updater came first, then we built the controller, and we could really combine both, which would be a great idea from the user perspective. So things get simpler. You don't need to explain two tools. You don't have two command line interfaces and so on. But there are technical issues like the controller currently can not be deployed on all the platforms where the agent updater can be deployed. The agent updater can also be deployed on IX and Solaris, which the controller cannot. So, and we have the second thing, that the controller is currently limited to the systemd environment and can only be deployed and used there. And to be able to combine both, we basically need to solve these issues and make both work on the same scope of systems. Doing that might bring us actually one step further towards, let's say, the ultimate vision, the one agent. And with that, Martin.
Okay, talking about something we have talked yesterday already about, and that's this little chip there. Yeah, physical servers typically have out-of-band management built in. They can be used to manage, for example, the server independently of the installed operating system, and they also provide a lot of useful information about the hardware of the server. It looks like this, for example, and it has caused a lot of problems in the past for us, to be honest. Because how can you actually monitor that? Easy thing, makes a lot of sense. Just in your host, add it as a property for the management board, monitor it via, for example, IPMI, and then you have the nice combination of management interface. That's how we prefix the services, because they need to be unique per host. So we have the sensors then, for example, there, and the stuff from the agent from the operating system. And this is actually, it's a nice feature because you have all information in one place. So what's wrong with that? while it is desirable to have the management board information close to the host, it's actually not helpful to merge them into one host because it creates unclear monitoring states. What if the OS is unreachable, but the management board is up? Is the host up or is it down? And how do you deal with, for example, if you have multiple operating systems on one physical server? Do you have a lot of duplicate services? Therefore, there's another perspective how you can do it, and that's from a monitoring perspective, a better perspective, have that as two independent hosts. Yeah? In monitoring speak then, one can be up while the other is down. And while the original idea was great, the implementation we did back then has caused a couple of problems. And therefore, we already decided in 2.3 to add a warning. You can still use it, but there's a warning that you shouldn't use it because at some point we will remove this feature. But no worries, we will address the underlying issues of that. Yeah? And we remove it because from our perspective, from a monitoring perspective, there are two different entities and they shouldn't be mixed. And so, how should you do it as a path forward? Monitor it as a dedicated host. You can use it as a dedicated host via SNMP. You can use it as with a special agent IPMI or the Redfish special agent. But it has this drawback that the information is split. You have two hosts, and the server, the hardware, and the OS will appear as two different hosts. And so we need to solve the underlying problem that we still have the same information in one place. And following some ideas we are considering, they're still in concept phase. Happy to hear feedback there on that as well. But our goal is that we combine the information in the UI. And one example could be that we just show related hosts in the services view of a host. That's one option. The other one would be something like this. Maybe you like also to see the up or down status of the host in the services view of the host. And then you also see, okay, there is a management board linked to that. And then you can directly jump to the management board. And for 2.4, our goal is that we have a solution which addresses the drawbacks of the dedicated host approach, so that we can then properly deprecate the existing management board monitoring option via host properties. With the introduction of Checkmk Cloud, we have significantly expanded our cloud integrations. And in 2.4, we will extend it again, and we will especially focus on Azure, where we see quite a lot of demand. And we will also do further extension of our monitoring coverage, and we do this typically in 3 different dimensions. And we do it in a very user-driven manner. And the one is commissioned projects. That's something where we have worked a lot to reduce the queue over the last couple of months, and where we are hopeful that in the near future we can open up the queue again so that we can implement requests coming in that, and we believe some of the requests we can also implement for 2.4. Then obviously code contributions. You have seen there is the potential to have large code contributions. We only do that on very specialized use cases. What we very typically see is the SNMP OID detection is missing something, and that just is a quick fix to extend it. Things like that are very typical pull requests nowadays, and we have quite a lot of them in the backlog at the moment, 57 open, and we focused over the last couple of months on 2.3 to get it done, but we promised that we would tackle it in the next couple of months again to get this number down. And finally, there's the ideas portal, and for us is basically if we have capacity, we'll work on things which are there. We accepted some of the things already in there, and we will work on that if capacity allows. We also have to do some monitoring plugin maintenance. And yesterday we talked about the new MS SQL agent plugin. It's our testbed for the future of our database monitoring architecture. And depending on the feedback which we get to during 2.3, we'll then start adopting it to other SQL databases. And we also have to get rid of VBS. We have 7 more plugins, agent plugins, which are VBS based, and we will basically just replace them without redoing them completely, just do a drop-in replacement. That goes then actually quite fast. let's jump into what we plan for configuring Checkmk. And you have just seen that improving the multi-step workflows is one of the things, and therefore I will just jump over it. And the cloud setup wizard, yeah, they're just the beginning. Yeah. Our goal is that you can get things done quicker without the need for documentation. We also want to preserve the concept of rules, because the rule-based configuration of Checkmk is really one of the fundamental approaches. We don't want to go back to the times of template-based configuration. We think rule-based is the right way to go. We just need to make it more accessible. And we need to remove the pain of finding the right rules. And with such wizards, we can also reduce the errors in configuration, because I've seen it quite a lot. People forget to configure this and that there, and then they don't have the entire information, something doesn't work. So these are also a little bit more fault-proof. And eventually we'll roll it out further to other workflows. Anything which creates piggyback data makes quite a lot of sense. So for example, Kubernetes, vSphere, Proxmox, and so on. And eventually, I think the agent bakery is also a good place where we can do things like that, where we really also have a workflow. It already is structured like a workflow, but we can further improve that. Talking about rules, my favorite colleague, Alex, has had a wish for a long time, and I think it can finally come true, and it's protecting important rules. Because like the automation users, we also ship a couple of rules with Checkmk, and these rules are actually quite important, because without them, for example, some dashboards don't work. And many of our partners and Checkmk consultants, during consulting, they also create best practice rules. And if you delete them, you delete these best practices from your environment, and you can do that without any warning at the moment. And we're considering to, for example, either protect important rules via permissions, so that you can basically say, this rule cannot be deleted, just like that, or just add a warning that you're doing something potentially harmful. When we implemented the on-the-fly rediscovery of service labels in 2.3, we also laid the foundation to allow refreshing of discovered parameters. And we got that question already yesterday, and not everyone probably knows what discovered parameters are. They are these things here. So for example, if you monitor an interface, we also discover the operational status, the speed, and this is set as the desired state for the monitoring. So for example, if it's discovered the interface is up, and then if it goes down, this is an alert. But there might be cases where you say, I have a new desired state. The new desired state is down. What do you have to do? You have to remove the service from monitoring and add it again. And that is because you might also have to do a service discovery along the way. It's a tedious process, and we have now the basics. We have now the underlying functionality in Checkmk to be able to do so. And therefore, our plan for 2.4 is to make that also happen, that you can just refresh the parameters. So next top is alerts and analytics, and also there Tanya already shared the main project we are working on, which are the rework of the notifications. And to just recap, our plan is to restructure them completely, to bring order into chaos. And with such a clearly structured workflow, which brings all the different routes together, it allows you also to create notification in a much more logical manner, which also scales better than the existing concept. We'll have also the much more beautiful notifications, so you don't have to hide Checkmk anymore from your colleagues who don't use Checkmk. And as a summary, so we plan to a new way to configure notifications. Everything in one place, smooth, clever, with good workflows. And with the reusable templates and connections, so that you don't have to, for example, configure the MS Teams plugin 100 times for each webhook leading to a different channel. And all that with this nice modern look. In 2.3, we also introduced these top lists, and we now have these more powerful capabilities in live status, and that allows actually us to do a lot of improvements in further places in Checkmk. Because, I mean, you might know graphs like that, which are really helpful. You can really discover this is what happened. And let's imagine if you can just sort them by the top 10 entries. That would make them much more usable. And then we can build even better views and dashboards in Checkmk. Then, cannot not talk about this. We decided to commit finally to the mobile app for Checkmk, something we tried to avoid for many years, because we said the other projects which we have, they are more important for us, because obviously a Checkmk app is very nice, but you've seen we have so many things which we want to do in Checkmk, we cannot do everything. And so we have evaluated it, and we also evaluated, can we just outsource that? Because I mean, an app, everyone should be able to do that. And when we got the offers back for that, and we heard that this will cost us several hundred thousands of euros, we were saying, this is not going to happen, we have to do it ourselves. And so we believe this is something we can deliver in 2.5, so not 2.4 and 2.5. And it will focus more on replacing the current mobile view. So views for hosts and services, actions, so acknowledge problems, schedule downtimes, and then later on, we can also think about notifications, graphs into it. So next topic for you again, Lars.
Okay, so extending Checkmk, and when we're talking about extending Checkmk, of course we talk about the REST API. The REST API has been extended over the years quite intensively, like adding more endpoints, giving you more options to work with the REST API. And having done so much on that side, of course there are still features missing, but what we want to do now is to focus more on the foundation, on what we build on. And there are several areas we want to work and improve on. First, and I think that's the very most important, the versioning of the API. So when initially introducing the API, well then the versioning is not too important in the first place. You build something, it's out there, everything is great. Well, but then comes change, then you learn something, you want to change something, maybe in an incompatible way, and then the pain begins, like we release it in incompatible change, you have your automations happily running, you apply the update, maybe you already read about the work and then you already are prepared for what you have to do later. After updating the site, spinning it up, you immediately have to change your automation, like being, again, compatible to the new endpoint. And that's a pain for you, of course. And because we know that, we also have a few pains. Namely, we have to avoid a few changes. Yeah? We don't want to produce too many incompatible changes. So we have ideas, we know about some weaknesses of the API, but we hesitate to do these changes because we don't want to do too much incompatible changes. So we limit ourselves in the end. So when we're then thinking about this and come to the conclusion, yeah, versioning is really needed, there are several approaches to that. The most basic, easiest one would be simply put a version to the whole API, and that's version 1. And with every incompatible change, you somehow increase that. Could work, maybe. And then there's the versioning of individual endpoints. Like when you make a change to an individual endpoint, you can increase the version independently and also maintain the old endpoint for as long as you wish. This way, you can make also different stability guarantees per endpoint and say, well, that has just been introduced. Take a look at that. It may change completely. It's just a preview. And then at some point, you can say, OK, this is stable, and only compatible changes will be made to this. And once we make an incompatible change, then we increase versions. For the 2.4, we want to decide on the concept for Checkmk, and then also start rolling out that to the endpoints we have so far. The next topic is about performance. And when you know, for example, live status under the hood, we also use that in some endpoints, and then you interface with the REST API, you may recognize, well, the one is much slower. Yeah? The REST API takes way more time. Of course, it has a few more features. It aggregates information from multiple sites, but still, it can be tedious sometimes. Over the years, we also made improvements in several areas, like improving individual endpoints and making them better in terms of performance. And here again, we don't want to work on the individual ones too much. Of course, we will look into them once we see problems. But what we want to do here is to work more on the, again, the foundation of the serialization of the data, and also on the validation, because that takes a lot of time in the processing chain of the REST API when answering your requests. And speaking about validation, we have another topic. When we look at the REST API interface with that, we are happy to have some very strict validation. Like the data that is coming from your request, it is validated, that is, it fits the schema we have defined. And then on the other side, the response which is sent out to you or your automation is also validated to ensure that it is in line with the specification. Now the problem here is that other parts of Checkmk are not that strict with the validation. So you may have data stored on your disk, which is read from there, then piped through Checkmk to the REST API to send it out to you as a response. And when it does not fit exactly our expectation, then the validation of the REST API may hit and complain about this issue. And it looks like a REST API bug. And that's actually a pain of the REST API team because they also always have to explain, well, it looks like, but it is not really. Yeah, we will somehow fix that, and then it needs to be forwarded internally to someone else, then fixed, and so on and so forth. And we don't want to have that. So we want to work on the rest of the system to make that way stricter with the data it deals with. Whether it's configuration or state information, we want to verify the data stricter. Ideally, during the update to a new version, the update mechanics load your data, do the validation, do the parsing, whatever is needed, detect the issues with the data, and then also migrate the data. In case it's a case we are aware of, we can build migration mechanics. Maybe we cannot do that for all the cases, and then we tell that to you while doing the update so that you can then work on the data, fix the data, to not run into the problems during the runtime of Checkmk, but in advance. Now, again, Martin.
So one part of UX is also accessibility. And accessibility means also that Checkmk can be used in your native language or whatever we have. And I mean, we have seen a lot of people, I mean, that's why we actually initially did stuff like that, is that people actually use Google Translate in their browser to translate Checkmk into their language, which is, I mean, you can do it, but has actually, if you already do it as a user, then we can just also already do it ourselves in the product for you to make it more accessible. And we started this machine translation of Checkmk into different languages actually already a couple of years ago. And we have since then learned quite a lot about how machine translations work, how you need to do that to work properly. We also implemented a couple of processes so that people can better contribute into it. For example, now you can directly contribute into a stable version so that you, when you do a suggestion to Checkmk on translate.checkmk.com, it comes into effect with the next patch release. And we now have taken that one step further to do AI-assisted high-quality translations. And what we learned is that it's actually quite good to have a glossary because a lot of Checkmk terms which are unique to Checkmk. And if you just give them into a translation matrix, what you might get out is actually not really sensible. So we have a glossary, we put on that a machine-based translation, and then we use that, for example, for the product, but we also now use it for the user guide. And that's actually our current focus, to create high-quality translations and we also planned it eventually for the website. And this is not just a vision. If you go to docs.checkmk.com, since I think Monday of this week, it's now live also in Spanish, Italian, and French. And you can help us there, yeah? So if you have any, if you see a translation which doesn't work for you, where you say, hey, this doesn't make sense, create a GitHub issue for the docs team, and they will then take care of it. They will actually change the source code. They will make the German text more simple, because that's one of the best ways to improve machine translations. And for the product, as existing, you can just go to translate.checkmk.com. And these are now the last awards for today. I want to thank both Hiroku and Mark. Hiroku is the guy who translated the Japanese Checkmk completely by himself. So I don't think he used machine translation. I think he just really translated Checkmk by hand. And then Mark, from our Spanish partner Tobiet, he was very fundamental in this new user guide translation process, giving a lot of feedback, ensuring that the final translation is really good. Both of them are not here, but we will send you an award. In general, beyond accessibility for languages, we will continue with our UX strategy. Consistency, efficiency, error prevention, and accessibility. And we plan a lot of smaller projects there, and we have some of these larger projects like notifications, making the setup more easy, and finally know more, show more. But we also want to improve another area you all come in contact every day, and that's the navigation. And when we introduced it 2.0, we made this fundamental change that you have monitor, customize, and setup. And we got a lot of positive feedback because, for example, the search bar and the setup menu is really nice. You can really, if you know what you're searching for, you really get fastly to your result. And also what we got as feedback, the split between monitor and setup is actually, of course, quite nice split because it reflects a little bit the user base of the monitoring admin versus the IT support, for example. Also nice that you don't have to scroll that much in Checkmk anymore in the, like as we had in 1.6. But there are a lot of things which are now coming more and more. And one of them is the number of entries in the setup or monitor menu, they just get more and more. It's the natural expansion of Checkmk, more features. So just another setting in somewhere. And we haven't solved that actually yet. And so we at some point have to start working on that. The same goes with the structure, with show more, of course, which is a pain point. And so for 2.5, we think about a navigation 2.5. So it's not something which we plan for next version. We'll do the incremental improvements for next version, but for 2.5, we're considering to basically go a little bit further there. And it's important for us that we have a good balance between rate of change and improvement, because we know that the new navigation, which we introduced in 2.0, was a big change. If you have to train all your users to something new again, that's not something we want to do without really creating a lot of value. So therefore, we are considering very carefully the options. It might be that we do very small changes and just do a lot of these small changes. But if we come with ideas which are fundamentally much, much better, we'll actually also consider to do much more fundamental changes. But this is something where we will keep you in a loop. Really, there will be surveys for that on that as well. We will work on concepts. We will showcase concepts sooner or later to get your feedback on it, because this is something we definitely want to tackle sooner or later. As you can see, there's a lot of things which we plan for Checkmk. And when I see this big list of things which we want to do, I'm always a little bit worried that we can actually get all of that done. But I had the same problem last year. And when I look at all the things which we were able to achieve actually for Checkmk 2.3, I'm positive that a lot of the things will also happen for 2.4. And so for us, it's not only about improving the core, but also going beyond for that with Checkmk, from all the aspects from infrastructure to applications to user experience. And with that, let's go to our Q&A. I'm gonna collect the. We also don't have all too much time, but yeah, let's see. So I put also all the questions from yesterday back on into Slido, and one of the questions was from Oliver: are there any plans for integrating vulnerability management products like Tenable, for example, or Greenbone? And as of today, there's no plan to do so. We discussed it actually before if we want to go more into integrating security stuff, but at the moment we'll focus more on going up more into application monitoring and staying in the monitoring area. But let's see what happens in the next couple of years, but I think this is not something which will happen in the next 1 to 2 or 3 years. And that's maybe something for you, Lars. This pre-flight check, because it now has gotten actually a lot better with 2.3, can be triggered also without OMD updates? Do you know that?
So to just trigger the preview.
Yeah, to see if you basically, when you run it on a system, to see would my system break when I update?
Yeah. I mean, the problem is that all the logic you need to execute that, including all the dependencies, like the Python version and its dependencies, they are in the new version. So there's nothing like we just load data, then somehow validate that, and then we know the outcome, whether it goes through the update or not. We actually need the code, we need the dependencies to answer that question, whether it's compatible or not, in the current structure. So in the short term, this will not be an easy task to get that. So we went the way to, for the new version, to just make some kind of intermediate step which you can roll back easily. Yeah? So you basically perform the update to some point where you can revert, and then if it goes wrong, we revert to the previous version again. So that's what we can reach at the moment.
By the way, apologies to Hiroku. I learned that Hiroku is not a guy, but a girl or woman, so apologies. Do you know when the hardware-software inventory will be available via the API? I guess via the REST API.
I mean, it's, I guess, oft-demanded feature. So it's up to product management to decide.
It's already on the ideas portal, I know. I mean, there we have to balance, because you see, we want to do these fundamental changes with performance and versioning. There's just so much we can do. We haven't planned it in, to be honest, for 2.4, because these big changes are something which we want to work on. But I think maybe after 2.4, or maybe if they have magic time, the developers, but we didn't plan it in for now. So, quickly, I think for pricing, the pricing is on the website. If we do any changes in pricing, we have already communicated them to you. If you plan further prices, I am not aware of anything like that in the future, but I'm also not doing the prices, so I cannot answer that to you. So you have to talk to our salespeople. But at least I didn't plan anything for the next couple of months to change something there. All the changes which we wanted to do, we already did.
You could also read that like, let's price in the future.
Maybe, yeah. Okay. There are many questions. I think what we will do is actually we'll do a little, because we will save these questions, and because I don't want to, like, these roadmap questions are something where we want to be transparent on. What we'll do is, I think we'll do a community call or something like that, where I will just keep these questions, and then you can ask me in this community call also a lot of other roadmap questions, and we can then discuss them in there and make that, instead of going through them all now.